Ladies and gentlemen, I want to express to you today that it's very, very important that we not let this election get bought. That it not become a matter of simply waving a checkbook at us and saying, I'd like to be president, look how much money I can throw at this. In fact, one of my opponents is trying to suggest that maybe I should step aside because he's got a lot of money. I've got a better suggestion. He's got an MBA from Harvard. If he'd use a little of that MBA from Harvard, he would know that if you've spent that much money and you don't have any more market share than the guy who you've outspent 100 to 1, friend, it's time to put that business out of its misery and support somebody. It's time to put that business out of its misery and support somebody who runs an enterprise a little bit more frugally and efficiently. And that's the way I'd like to run the federal government, because if somebody will spend that much money to get the job, what on earth might they do when they're spending your money when they get the job? That's just going to be wrong. You know, I sometimes remember what the prophet Isaiah said. He said, look to the rock from which you were hewn, and the quarry from which you were dug. As a nation, we need to look where we've come from. Amen. We need to remember who we are as a country. I think sometimes we forget. You know, history is to a civilization what the memory is to an individual. If you woke up this morning and didn't remember who you were or where you lived or what your kids' names were, you got to the breakfast table and looked around and said, who are all you people? It'd be pretty frightening. You'd be completely disoriented and lost if you lost your memory. If a culture forgets where it's come from, if it loses its sense of perspective and its history, it gets lost and disoriented. I suggest to you that America today is off track because it's forgotten who it is and where it's come from. We're not a great nation because of our government. We're a great nation because our people started on their knees and asked for God's blessing. Our founding fathers said it this way, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when those 56 signers put their signatures to that document, they knew that if this experiment in government that they were going to attempt didn't work out, that it wouldn't just be that their taxes would go up under King George. They knew that they would pay with their blood, as with their families. It took courage, and it took conviction. And it also took a bold step to say that we no longer will be a part of a nation where people's net worth or last name or ancestry is what elevates them. That we were going to create a different concept of humanity and government, and that is that everybody would be viewed as an equal. Everybody with the same level of intrinsic worth and value. And that nobody would be more valuable than somebody else. And it wouldn't be that a last name, ancestry, net worth, ability or disability, capacity or incapacity would elevate one to a greater level of worth and value than another. And that's why for us to affirm the sanctity of human life is not an issue that we can just say is political. It's not a left, right, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican. It's more important than that. It goes to the heart of who we are as a nation. And it really does define us in the sense that if we value each other as having equal worth, then we know that any time somebody devalues one of us, all of us potentially are devalued along with him. And that's why today I suggest to you that there is a lot at stake in this election. And that's why I ask you to not just casually say, no, I think I'll vote for Huckabee versus some of those other guys. I hope you will join me in understanding that we need to return to understanding who we are as a nation, that our founding fathers had it right, that we are a unique people, that our system and form of government is an incredible gift to affirm our basic individual freedom and to give us the capacity to be what we could not be if we were under any other system. And to affirm that that freedom, in fact, is God's gift to us and not government's gift to us. That's what we have to do. Our government has miserably failed us. We can't even secure our own borders. It's harder for you to get on an airplane in Tulsa to go somewhere than it is for somebody to slip across an international border. I promise as president, we will fix it. We'll secure the fence. I'm the only candidate that says we will secure those borders within 18 months. We'll do it with American labor and American materials. And it is not because we don't welcome people to come here. It's that we want everyone who comes here to do it the right way, the legal way. And we want it to be so that everyone who lives within our borders lives with his head up, in the light, out of the darkness, nobody afraid when they see a police car running and hiding, because there's nothing to fear when we are abiding within the context of our law. And that's how we should live in America. I know where this country's come from, and I'm grateful that God has given us His blessing to be where we are. And I know that we've got to return to the principles that made us great, or we can't expect His blessing to stay with us. And I also know, as the prophet would say, look to the rock from which you're hewn, quarry from which you're dug. I know where I've come from. I realized I came out of a little red house on 2nd Street in Hope, Arkansas, the son of a father who was a firefighter and had to work a second job as a mechanic on his days off. And he didn't do that just because he liked to work long, long days, 6 and 7 days a week. He did it because if he didn't, he couldn't make the rent payments on the little rent house we lived in.
Love of his family.
And you know, my mother, oldest of 7 kids, grew up like many of your parents did, in the Depression, experienced World War. My parents coming out of that time of hardship. My mother being a person that is the oldest of 7, in a house where they didn't have electricity, running water, had dirt floors, outdoor toilets. Some of your families probably tell similar stories of their hardships. But you know what about our parents' generation? We call them the greatest generation. You know why? Because when they lived through all of those hardships, it didn't make them bitter and cynical and angry. You know what it made them? It made them want for their kids a better life than they ever dreamed. And they spent their lives making every sacrifice imaginable so that their kids would have a better life than they did. And on their shoulders, we have indeed lived better than they ever could have dreamed that we would have and could have. Now I wonder, are we prepared to give our kids a better life? And we better be, because right now, we've given them $9 trillion worth of debt. And that's not the way we need to turn it over to them. We can do better than that. And that's why I'm asking you to join me, not just in a campaign, but in a cause to return America back to being that nation that understands its obligation is not to indulge itself, but its basic responsibility is to prepare the way so the next generation and the generations following can become the greatest generation.